Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar, From Gray to Green, a look at the City of Kansas City, Missouri's green infrastructure project in the West Bottoms. My name is Leslie Barlin, and I am the Green Business Network Program Manager at Bridging the Gap. This is a project that I am really excited for you all to hear about and learn about today. At BTG, our office is right down in the West Bottoms, so we've been able to kind of follow construction and watch as it all came together. And I think it's a really great demonstration project of so many different applications of green infrastructure. So thank you to our guest speakers who have joined us today. We have Lisa Treese, who is the Senior Landscape Architect with KC Water's Smart Sewer Program, and Jeff Dowdrick, the Project Manager with HNTB. Before we get started, though, I just want to mention a few things about today's webinar and about GBN in general. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode, so everyone's camera and microphones are turned off except for our speakers. And we hope that you'll have lots of questions during the presentation today. If you do have a question, you can use either the Q&A feature that's located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, or the chat function. And speakers, if you see a question that you want to answer, feel free to jump in, but otherwise we'll keep them till the end. Finally, we are recording this webinar, so within a few days, I should have it up on the Green Business Network website, and you can go back and rewatch it as many times as you like. If you're new to the Green Business Network or aren't yet a member, or even if you are, I encourage you to visit these websites to learn more about not only the Green Business Network program, but about the work and all the different opportunities that we have to get involved with our larger organization, BTG. So we operate the City of Kansas City's community recycling centers. We plant trees and we work to preserve remnants of wildlands across the metro. We conduct litter cleanups to keep our local streams and waterways clean, and much more. Almost all of our programs rely on corporate and individual sponsors. So we'd love to work with you or your company. And if this is something you're interested in learning more about, feel free to send me a message in the chat, or you can follow up with me after the webinar. I also want to be sure to recognize our Green Business Network sponsors. They help make programs like this one possible, and we're extremely grateful for their support. Another way that we are supported is through our members, and I know many of you attending are already Green Business Network members. We also have folks joining us from the Kansas City Industrial Council today, so thank you so much for that support. But if you're not a member, I hope you'll consider joining this year, and you can do that either on our website or by reaching out to me. And then finally, before I turn it over to our presenters, I want to give a quick reminder about BTG's business recycling program. Through a grant that we received from Mid-America Regional Council's Solid Waste Management District, we can work with your business on your waste reduction goals. We can perform a free waste assessment, we can make recommendations and help you identify solutions for hard to recycle items. We can oftentimes provide free recycling bins and customized signage. We can help you organize and launch a program kickoff, help you train your employees. Eric Hemphill is the program manager, and I put his contact info up here if you're interested in learning more. I should note this program only allows for us to provide free services to businesses located in the 5-county area of Missouri. So if you're in Kansas, we're still happy to provide you with guidance or connect you with a similar program like Johnson County's Green Business Program. Okay, so at this time, I am going to turn it over to you, Lisa, and let you introduce this project. So if you want to go ahead and screen share, and I turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Okay, let me get my screen shared here. All right, can everyone see my presentation? Yes? Okay. Yes. All right, thank you. All right, so we're here to talk about the Green Infrastructure Project in the Central Industrial District, more commonly known as West Bottoms. And I'm Lisa Treese. I'm, like Leslie said, Senior Landscape Architect at KC Water, and I help with our green infrastructure projects. Joining here in a little bit, you'll hear mostly from Jeff Dowdrick from HNTB, who is the project engineer on this project. And he'll go into a lot of detail about the project for you. This is our agenda of what we'll go over. And one of the things we'll kind of start off with is a video, and you'll get a chance to see Terry Goddard, who was the project manager for this project, and he just retired May 1st. So very excited for Terry. Looking forward to seeing what his next chapter holds. So anyway, you'll get to see him in the video, but he won't be presenting with us today. Okay, so some background. This project was done as part of Kansas City's Smart Sewer Program, which is a multi-decade infrastructure investment to make sure our sewer systems continue to work reliably and effectively. The program addresses the system-wide overflow control challenges facing our sewer system in a way that protects our community and restores this vital piece of our city's infrastructure. So this project includes nature-based solutions, also known as green infrastructure. And this project is designed to reduce the combined sewer overflows from this particular watershed, the Central Industrial District, by 20%. So it keeps that water from entering the sewer, kind of as you see here in this diagram up in the upper right. When you make a green infrastructure feature, it takes on some of the water so that you have more space in your sewer system for the things that need to go in the sewer system. So we're integrating green infrastructure in our Smart Sewer program to provide multiple community benefits. Green infrastructure can help manage stormwater the way nature intended by capturing, infiltrating, and in some cases, utilizing rainwater where it falls before it enters the combined sewer system. Green infrastructure can take many forms depending on the location and can be as large as a community park or as small as a rain garden. So now I'll show a quick video which gives an overview of the project before I hand it over to Jeff.
A historic area in the West Bottoms is getting some much-needed improvements. KC Water is nearly complete with the Central Industrial District Improvements and Green Infrastructure Project, or the CID project. KC Water engineer Terry Goddard is the project manager.
It's a part of the Smart Sewer program where we're basically trying to separate stormwater from the combined system.
The CID Green Infrastructure Project includes 3 areas in the West Bottoms: the Riverview, the Stockyards, and the Warehouse districts. There are new infiltration systems, new drains, permeable paved streets, gravel infiltration trenches, improved bike and nature trails. The purpose of these natural solutions is to collect, treat, and infiltrate stormwater runoff and control overflow. In the Riverview district, from Wyoming to Mulberry Street underneath the I-70 viaduct, engineers designed an infiltration system to catch rainwater, as well as an above-ground collection system.
On this side, we'll have scuppers above us that will collect drainage from the I-70 deck and empty it into these cisterns. We have 2 cisterns, one at Wyoming and then one at Mulberry Avenue.
The bike trail will have bump outs to go around the cisterns, a rest stop, and bike racks.
We work closely with the Heritage Trail Association to try to inform them what was going to go on and to give them input and let them give input on what they wanted to see down here.
The nearly $10 million project has been in the making since 2016. At the Warehouse and Stockyard districts near I-670 and Liberty Street, KC Water restored some of the original 100-year-old stones used in the roadway and combined them with the new permeable surface. This area, ideal for festivals and street markets, allows rainwater to soak through the ground. Nearby, an interactive boardwalk will allow the public to view native plants and observe the bioswale collection system.
Sit on the boardwalk and have lunch and just enjoy the view and nature.
Although COVID-19 has interrupted some construction, the CID Green Infrastructure Project is expected to be substantially completed by mid-September of 2020 and final completion by the end of the year of 2020. When complete, this project will help protect the environment by reducing the amount of stormwater entering into our sewer system, which will lessen the frequency of sewer overflows. For KC Water, I'm Heather Frierson.
All right. So now I'll hand it over to Jeff Dowdrick.
Thanks, Lisa. Can you hear me okay? All right.
Yes, I think there might be a video accidentally starting automatically over there. Hang on. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Gotta love autoplay on YouTube. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
There we go. All right. Thank you. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Jeff Dowdrick. I'm a project manager over at HNTB. I was the lead project engineer on this project regarding design and then through construction. So been a really great project to work on. Kissick Construction was the contractor. I'm going to be showing some pictures here as we go through, and you'll kind of see during construction we get to see the kind of the meat and potatoes of what's underground and things like that. So I kind of want to go into the details with you and show you how we went about infiltrating this stormwater. I guess we also presented this similar presentation to the KCIC group a couple of weeks ago, so this might look a little familiar to some of those who were at that meeting, but I'm going to try to go into a little bit more detail here. But we've got three distinct districts that we were trying to implement green infrastructure in the West Bottoms. There's the Riverview district, which is kind of the north side of the I-70, where that I-70 viaduct infiltration trenches are. You can see that yellow box that Lisa is highlighting right now. There's another site in what's called the Warehouse district, which is where all the antique shopping and things are. That's the I-670 viaduct, permeable paper plaza. That's the one kind of in the middle there. So that one's kind of underneath the I-670 viaduct. And then the last site, which is the biggest site, is the Liberty Lot bioretention area. So we took a large chunk of the Liberty Lot and created some diversions from nearby warehouses and diverted those into a bioretention area at that location. So tried to spread the wealth out in terms of green infrastructure for this one project. I think it worked really well. A lot of the stakeholders really liked it. So next slide, please. So I want to talk first about the I-670 viaduct green plaza. This is the second one I mentioned there underneath I-670, just south of where the antique area is. And so, there are quite a few components in this specific location. One of the main features is a permeable pavement parking area underneath the bridge. And so we got new pavers, and we went along 13th Street or 13th Terrace, down Hickory, and down across 14th Street, as well as made a large permeable pavement parking area, which can be used for multiple different types of events and as well as parking. And then another big component here was diverting a lot of the storm drainage from Liberty Street and the surrounding warehouses into a dry well system. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. Basically, we take the storm water from the surrounding area, and then we kind of do a little bit of cleaning of that water, and then we inject it into the sandy soils underneath. So down in the West Bottoms here, unlike most of the areas around Kansas City, we have a lot sandier soils. So it gave a lot of opportunity to help infiltrate some of the stormwater instead of allowing it into the combined sewer system. So that was one thing that we tried out on this that we didn't normally get to typically try in other sites. And then, one thing I will mention about this site as well is underneath 13th, 14th, and Hickory Streets, there were some of the original set stones or cobblestones underneath a thin layer of asphalt. And so we tried to reuse those as much as we possibly could and try to salvage some of that just to kind of keep with some of that historic nature. Next slide. this is the north side of the plaza at 13th Terrace and Hickory. One of the features that was asked to be implemented here was a meet and greet plaza. So there's this kind of a seating area along with tree planters that people can kind of meet and walk there. So if you ever go out there, you'll notice there's kind of a seating area there. And the trees have silva cells, soil cells, which are kind of structural. So it creates a structural soil. It's like an egg crate, basically, that you put the soil in, and that prevents the soil from being compacted so that the roots can grow better in the trees and you get a healthier tree. Next slide. So this is an example during construction of those dry wells that I mentioned. These are 18-inch diameter slotted PVC pipes. They're about 30 feet deep. And so we take the stormwater and then we dump the stormwater into these wells, and then it goes into the sandy soil, like I said below. So you can kind of see there's 10 of them. You can see the concrete structures. That's these PVC pipes are actually in those. And so the water gets distributed into each of those structures and then injected down into the sandy soil below. And in the lower right-hand corner there, you can see a picture of the construction, get an idea of the size of those things with the man standing there next to the hole. Next slide. And I think we get about 8 to 10 CFS or so, that's cubic feet per second, which is quite a bit for that kind of a system. So we're pretty happy with the way those are performing. The other thing, like I mentioned, were the silva cells or the soil cells. Those are those egg crate type material where, like I said, it keeps it from compacting. So this is what that looks like underneath the pavers. If you go out there, you'll see the street trees in the paver areas. And so we created these kind of planter boxes underground for the trees to be able to thrive in. And so they'll be getting water. You can see the gravel there surrounding them. That's an open graded rock, so there's not a lot of fine material in there. When it rains, that rock fills up with water, and then that will actually, the trees will get water from that, and then the water there will also percolate into the ground. Next slide. This just to show you kind of how we reuse some of the set stones on the project. So the set stones that we actually were able to remove intact, we ended up reusing those in some areas as actual pavers. And then the ones that ended up getting broken or crushed, we actually crushed them down into a seeding aggregate for the concrete sidewalks and did an exposed aggregate sidewalk. So if you go out to the site, you'll notice you can see the rock in the concrete, and that kind of maroon colored rock is the aggregate that used to be those set stones. So it's kind of a neat feature, provides a similar color to what you maybe would have seen, 100 years ago if you had come down to the West Bottoms. Next slide. This is a picture of kind of the way, one of the features that we did here was we tied the bioretention area that's in the Liberty lot. We tied it to all the rock that was underneath the pavers that stores a lot of water. So we both have storage in the bioretention area and in the gravel. And so one thing that we wanted to do was make sure that if there's a lot of water in the bioretention area, can it get into the gravel area and help percolate into the ground even more there, and vice versa. So you can see those PVC pipes there that are connecting those two together. And so we have kind of an inlet on the bioretention area side, and then it comes into the gravel and it can kind of percolate into the gravel that way to provide a little bit extra infiltration. Next slide. And one thing I will mention is it varies. It's about 2 to 3 feet of rock underneath the pavers when you go out there. So there's the paver layer, and then there's like 2 to 3 feet of open graded rock. And then you get the kind of the silty sandy material, which is kind of native to the West Bottoms. So it's thicker than you maybe think when you go out there. So this is just a picture of the almost done. It's done now, but this picture was taken when it was almost done, of what that permeable pavement area looks like. We didn't want to do striping on this on purpose. We wanted to kind of make it a little bit more free to where people could move in and out and do what they wanted to, but so it was more of a parking suggestion than actually painting the lines. So we decided to use the different color pavers in order to achieve that. Next slide, please. This is a shot at 14th Street and Hickory. So you can just see the intersection. One thing to note, you can see the kind of light colored bollards there. We decided to go with no curb here in this case. We're using a ribbon curb, but it's a flush curb, so there's no drop. So people can move freely in and out. If the city or the surrounding community decides they want to close the streets off and kind of use this as a bigger plaza area during an event or something, that'll just make it easier for people to get around. So we decided to go, instead of using like a 6-inch curb, we decided to use bollards instead. So, and then you can see the street trees there, kind of in the center to the right there. That's where all the silva-cells are. So if you go out there, you'll be able to, you won't see the silva-cells, but you'll know that there's silva-cells under the pavers at those locations. Next slide. All right, so that was kind of the I-670 site, and then I'm going to move on to the Liberty Lot bioretention area. So this was about the Liberty Lot is about a 13-acre lot, and it was typically just a parking lot. Sometimes they, if there was a parade downtown, for example, the Royals parade, a lot of people could park there, and then you would, bus them up downtown, or it would be parking for the American Royal. And so what we did here is we kind of divided the site in half, to where if there was a potential extension of Hickory Street to the south, that we wouldn't interfere with any potential development between Liberty Street and the potential future Hickory Street. So we stayed to the kind of the east of that point, and then we put the bioretention there. And one thing that we're doing here is, we're taking about 2.5 to 3 acres of roof drainage from the combined system and diverting it into this bioretention area. So we're trying to capture a lot of impervious area that would otherwise drain directly into these combined sewer pipes, potentially overflowing into the Missouri River, or having to be treated at the wastewater treatment plant there. We're now able to divert that from the system and infiltrate that into the ground, as well as provide an amenity to the community here. So that's about a 6 or so acre bioretention area. And it's got a channel that connects a larger kind of low spot there, as well as a boardwalk that we installed on the very, very north end of that, which we'll have some pictures of here in just a minute. Next slide. So there's just kind of a before picture of what the Liberty Lot looked like. Not a whole lot going on there, just a big kind of gravel and dirt site. Next slide. And then just going to show you a few pictures kind of progressing during construction. This was after mass grading. You can see the kind of the channel and the larger low area, as well as that connection that I mentioned before between the subgrade of the permeable pavement and the bioretention area. Next slide. And this is the final kind of version of the Liberty Lot. This is just after construction was complete, and then we had a rainfall event. And so you can see the water kind of sitting in the channel in the low area there. And you can also see the boardwalk there. Obviously, I think this is a really cool boardwalk. Kind of gets people out into green infrastructure a little bit. So I was very excited to be able to put that in. We've got some seating along there, and we've purposefully removed some of the railing to allow people to just step off the boardwalk and go explore in the green infrastructure where they want. Next slide. One thing that we did also incorporate was some educational signage, sort of a mix between the art and the educational signage here. On the right-hand side of the screen, what we did was we selected specific native plants that had been planted out at the site, and then created some panels at the entrance to the boardwalk to kind of help provide a barrier there. And those are Core-10, I believe, steel panels. And I can't remember the 4 plants we put in there, but I think they're relatively common native plants. But what we wanted to show there was educate people as to the how native plants have such a deep root system. A lot of the biomass for the native plants is below ground. So that was kind of what we wanted to emphasize there when we put the panels up. Next slide. The last site I'll talk about here is the I-70 site, the very north end of the West Bottoms. Here we're taking, or currently right now, or before the project, a lot of this water, or all of the water, was draining off of the bridge deck hitting the ground, and then it would go into the combined sewer that was running along Intercity Viaduct Road, which runs beneath the eastbound bridge of I-70. And, you know, I had been down there during 3 to 5 inch rainfall events, and, you know, there would be 2 feet of water standing down there. So we wanted to try to capture as much of that impervious area as we possibly could and infiltrate that into the ground. And the biggest way that we did that was we went through, and wherever there were bridge scuppers, underneath the bridge scuppers, we dug a trench about a 3-foot deep by 15-foot wide trench, and then installed, similar to what we did with underneath the pavers, an open graded rock that would collect the water, hold it, and percolate it into the ground. Again, sandy soils. I mean, we were getting great infiltration here. We had, even during construction, before we had the aggregate in there, we had a couple, you know, 1 to 2 inch rainfall events, and it just sucked the water up. So it was really great. And then we found also that even some of the sites farther down from like from the Kansas side, a lot of the water would drain down this way, and it would even suck up some of that water as well. So I think we were getting more benefit just from some of the other water that gets to this spot also being infiltrated into the ground, not just what was falling straight from the bridge decks. So that's the main component there. And then we also installed the 2 cisterns, which you saw in the video, where we wanted to test the cisterns, and we took some of the bridge scuppers and created manifolds to kind of divert that water and then get it into the cisterns. And then the intent was just to use the cisterns to help water the plantings around the bike plaza, as well as it could be used to fill up tanks for water trucks and things like that, so that the water could be reused. So kind of really a test of cisterns just to kind of see how they might be used. Next slide. And this is a picture of construction of the trenches. You can see on the left side there, the open trenches. We had to be really careful in these cases, both at 670 and I-70. Obviously, we have the bridge above, but it's also below. So there are footings below that we had to kind of work around and be cognizant of, and make sure we didn't damage or cause any issues. So we like I said, dug those about 3 foot deep to get to the underlying sandy soils, and then backfilled with a large open graded aggregate to help, you know, provide additional storage for water. Next slide. And you can kind of see the scuppers above. That's kind of the finished product, what it looked like when we were done. So it's not super, I guess, pretty. I guess I think it's pretty, but it's not like, you know, a bioretention or anything, but it does provide a really great benefit in terms of volume control and reduction. So, and you can kind of see how the scuppers, if you look at the center top part of the screen, you can see those bridge scuppers and how they would just drop down the rainwater onto the gravel. Next slide. And there is the finished cistern in the bike plaza. The plantings weren't quite complete during that picture, but that's an example of the cistern, and then the bike paths. And some of the things that we have added to the bike path, we've added some striping and things to help bikers, because we know it was a little bit of an impediment to the bike path. So we did work with the Riverfront Heritage Trail to kind of help make that a little, sight distances and things a little better for the getting around those cisterns with the bikers. Next slide. All right, so talk about project impacts. I think I've kind of talked about it a little bit, but the main, obviously, benefit to these are any type of green infrastructure project, at least here in Kansas City, is to reduce those combined sewer overflows, divert that water, replenish the groundwater, provide amenity in terms of plantings and things like that. You know, one of the things, at least for the West Bottoms, is there's not a lot of green space in the West Bottoms. There's not a lot of parking in the West Bottoms, just given the fact that it was constructed so long ago, prior to cars and things like that. And obviously, reinvestment in terms of economic benefits is a big thing. So, next slide. Just a quick downspout disconnect, kind of what that looks like. In some cases, it was diverting it to a bioretention area, but sometimes it was just taking it off and letting it drain into a inlet, like a street inlet, that we had then diverted into green infrastructure. So like I said, we had about 3 to 3.5 total acres of roof drains that were diverted from the combined sewer into green infrastructure. Next slide. So just some of the local benefits, like I said, to kind of reiterate, providing a green space for people to take a walk or get away. I've seen people biking down there, walking dogs and things like that. Provides a bit of a noise buffer. I know that there are the trains that run along the east side of the park. I'm hoping once the trees get a little bigger, that'll help buffer some of the noise. Obviously providing air quality benefits with the trees. Like I said, the additional parking, I know a lot of the nearby business owners were very happy to see some additional parking down there because it can be very difficult to find parking at times in the West Bottoms. You know, we haven't really talked about flood reduction, but it is a potential benefit for this. We have to be careful there because the purpose of this is to reduce combined sewer overflows, but we have provided a substantial amount of detention in these areas, so there should be a pretty good flood reduction component to this as well. But that was not the primary purpose of the project. And then, you know, one thing that also needs to be recognized is that, you know, KCMO will continue to maintain these sites moving forward. This is as part of the consent decree. So it's not one of those where you just build it and then forget about it. They will be continually out there maintaining those sites. So, next slide. I think, Lisa, that's back to you.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, Jeff. And so some takeaways, some things that, you know, maybe some inspiration from this project that you could consider take back to your business. You know, one of the things that you saw an example of in this project was increasing green space. So, you know, this image up on the right shows an example of a business that, you know, reclaimed some of their green space from pavement. And that can be, you know, sometimes a pretty simple way to improve the quality of life around your building or around your campus. Reducing impervious surfaces. So this is one way you can help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff that leaves your property. Permeable pavers. So you saw our example of the big permeable paver parking lot. The nice thing with the pavers that I especially like, they come in so many different designs and they do look like an upgrade over your, you know, other pavements that are out there. So it's one of the things, you know, not only do you get the stormwater benefit, but you also get a pretty substantial boost in the look of your parking area or other paved areas. Downspout disconnections. You know, this can be kind of a low-hanging fruit, sort of a, you know, depending on how big your roof is. Sometimes these can be, you know, if you even just have a few spots where maybe they don't take as much runoff and you can disconnect that downspout. Any water that's not going directly into that combined sewer can help provide a little bit more space in that sewer for the things that need to go in there. Educational art. So this is one that, you know, there's so many ways to kind of educate while also making an art piece. And this example here I thought was neat, where they took a downspout disconnection and showed, you know, added some fish on there, because that's ultimately where the water goes, right, to the river and where the fish are. And, you know, this is a hard one, but anytime that you can make time to give input, when there's public investments being made in your area, you know, we do a lot of public meetings. You probably see announcements and things like that. And, you know, I know everyone's busy. It takes time out of our lives to go to these meetings, but we really do benefit and value the input that we hear from the community, so that we can, you know, no one knows these sites or these areas as well as the people who are right around there. And so we can find out so much more and be able to do a better project if we have input. So thank you. That concludes our presentation piece. Here's our contact information up here on the slide. And I think Leslie's gonna walk us through some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa and Jeff. We do have some questions. And if you have a question, or as we're going through these, if you think of more, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A or in the chat. So I'm just going to kind of go through the ones that we've gotten. This one is from Kristen, and I think you may have touched on it a little bit after she posted this question, but just to make sure that we get it answered. Is there, she was asking about where the excess water went before the amendments, and you talked about how it was going into the combined sewer overflow and then eventually into the Missouri River. Was there significant surface flooding in the area prior to this?
There was some nuisance flooding depending on where you're at. You know, up at I-70, I think I had mentioned that there was quite a bit of flooding underneath the bridges during, you know, 1 to 2 or greater rainfall events. When it came to the I-670 site and the Liberty lot, those were kind of closely tied together in terms of the drainage beforehand. And it would tend to pond up along between the railroad tracks and the Liberty lot site. The Liberty lot kind of drains from west to east towards the railroad tracks, and then the railroad tracks drains that way. So it would end up kind of ponding up along there and then moving northward. And then it would kind of flood along 13th Terrace there. So that has substantially been reduced since we project in, at least as far as I can see. So.
We have kind of a question related to that. What does the 20% CSO reduction translate into in terms of how much water the system is able to manage? And then to go on from there, was there a particular design storm that you designed for? And were there other design strategies that you considered but abandoned in the process?
I'll take the first part, Jeff, and then
All right.
I'll hand it to you. Okay, so the 20% reduction, that was a number I got from our engineering team. So they ran some calculations to determine that. So I don't know the gallons offhand. I could get that information and send it over to you, Leslie, if you want to share that back afterwards. And as far as the design criteria, so typically for our projects where we're doing green infrastructure as part of a smart sewer project or a combined sewer overflow reduction project, we look at what's called the Storm D. So that is typically, and man, correct me if I say this wrong, Jeff, because these numbers sometimes mix in my head, but it's 1.4 inch rainfall in 24 hours. So often our combined sewer overflows are actually caused by frequent storms. It doesn't take a very big storm to cause an overflow in much of our system. So even a rainfall that's less than, say you even get a ½ inch rainfall in 24 hours, in some parts of the system, though, that can cause a combined sewer overflow. So if we can capture that first, volume, that 1.4 inches in our green infrastructure, that leaves more capacity in the system for the rest of the water. And also reduces our amount of overflows down quite a bit. So Jeff, did I?
Yeah, no, that was good. I will say that that was kind of the baseline. And then when we could, for example, up at I-70, we had to get to a certain depth to get down to the sandy soil that we needed to. And the width was kind of stuck. So we ended up getting more capacity out of that than a 1.4 inch rainfall event. So just, I guess, kind of the physical not constraints, but you have to build things a certain way sometimes. And so even for the bioretention area, for example, we were able to capture more than that, which was, I think, going to be beneficial for that flood control piece, if we want to call it that, even though that's not our intent. So, it also, one thing that we have to consider is a lot of these systems are already not really sized. I mean, a lot of the pipes and structures in this area were built 100 years ago. They weren't built to handle that much water. So we also have to consider what we're tying into. And that was really more of a constraint for us, was what we were tying into, as opposed to we're going to design for the 10-year. It was, what's the capacity of the downstream system?
Was there anything that you had planned on that had originally been a part of the project that you decided against in the process?
Wow, there was probably a lot of that. Because we started with the design phase, and the original project actually was from 12th to 14th Street, and we had some. They had just done a project at 13th and Hickory, and so some of the stuff that we had originally planned to do along Hickory Street from 12th to 13th Terrace, we ended up kind of focusing more on developing that Green Plaza area. So that was one of the big ones that we ended up changing at the very beginning. And we had looked at a couple other smaller sites around the West Bottoms too. I know there's like a ponding area. I think they call it Lake Laramie or something over there. I think it's like 11th and Santa Fe, but we had looked at some other sites as well, but we ended up kind of honing in on these 3 sites and focusing in on those specific, and I think we originally had a permeable pavement system in the Liberty lot to begin with, and then we changed it to bioretention too. So the original project that was in concept didn't end up looking anything like that in the end, just due to different things changing over time.
Right.
And it's pretty typical, of many of these projects. As we dig into the design phase and we get public input, we learn more about the site and what makes sense there. So that's pretty often our initial concept, some things carry through, but then there's other things that change.
Makes sense. Okay, next question. Are the trees that are planted in the Silva cells able to access engineered soils in the larger area around the planting?
Yes, yeah. So they're kind of, I guess the soil is contained in the Silva cells themselves, which that's where the root systems would grow. And then we have a kind of a fabric, permeable fabric surrounding that, or kind of enveloping that soil system. And then you have the rocky, that open graded rock in the permeable pavement area beyond that. But then we also have a very nice sandy, silty soil below the paver, below the Silva cells that the root systems can access and grow kind of down into that as well. So, but yeah, it can. The intent is that water in the aggregate can then kind of percolate into the soil material and help feed the trees as well.
We've got a question here. What's the boardwalk planking made of?
It is a composite. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Lisa. I believe that is a composite.
I think that's where we landed. We had quite a bit of conversations about that. We looked at a concrete product at one point. We were trying to find something that would be durable and as slip resistant as possible, something we didn't have to go out there and be putting stain on and stuff like that. So this is where we landed, the best balance that we could find of budget and those other factors.
All right, we have a question about if there's opportunities to further develop the bioretention area. So for example, volunteers to install more plantings, adding insect habitats, etc.
Well, I'm always open to talk. We have a pretty open door of, if there's volunteer groups that are interested in partnering with us, we could talk through. I think our biggest limitation is often, our budget. And so if there are volunteer groups that are interested in helping, we'd welcome that. So yeah, feel free to reach out. We could talk.
You guys talked a little, or touched a little bit on, or talking about how the, KC Water as part of the consent decree maintenance would be included in that. What are some of the biggest maintenance things that you'll be looking at going forward for the work done here?
Yeah, so typically for our smart sewer projects, we have a 3-year service agreement built in with the original contractor that built the project. And then after the 3 years, then we either bring it in-house or we have another contractor take it on. And so for this site, we just started our 3 years of maintenance. And basically the tasks that they'll do, the biggest one, litter removal, trash removal. They do weed removal. That's going to be a big project for this one. It's a very big site, a lot of vegetation. They do the basic, pruning. They keep the edges clean. That's, one of the tasks that's in there. They clean the permeable pavements twice a year, like which is a kind of the recommended frequency for a cleaning on those systems. They'll clean out the underground facilities that we have if they get clogged up or if we have things there. So there's a whole long spec of the things that they're doing out there, but those are kind of the high points.
So you kind of led into the next question that I was going to ask, which was Carrie was saying that the West Bottoms tends to be inundated with trash, particularly during and after large scale events. So she was asking if there were any preventative measures. So it sounded like the maintenance contract takes care of that. But what about like those large scale events that do happen? Is that a foreseen problem?
We're working through that right now. This is definitely a new type of site for us. We haven't had a site in this type of setting yet where there is that extra demand, especially when they have the shopping weekend, that big shopping weekend. So we are actually, there's some planning going on within the city departments on how we're gonna, look to better manage that parking space. We're learning on this one for sure. But right now we do pick up trash. The contractor picks up trash at a minimum every other week, which during the busy time of year, that's probably not going to be enough. So yeah, that's more to come there. It's in process.
Awesome. Let's see, there's a question from Josh here. Are these green infrastructure strategies good ideas to replicate in other areas in the KC Metro? What other green infrastructure projects are planned in the future?
So I think they're a great idea. I think, I'm biased, I guess, because this is the type of project that I focus on for the city. But as far as other projects that are planned, right now we do have design underway for green infrastructure at Mill Creek Park. So that is one that just started under design contract recently. We also have some projects that are under design contract for a couple of other outfalls. They're sewer separation projects, which are planned to most likely include green infrastructure. So those center around, the outfall names probably aren't that useful, but 40th and Monroe, and then one of them is near Cleveland Park. So those are some of the areas currently in design. We have some big planning studies going on right now for the upcoming watersheds. And so basically within the next few years, we'll be determining what projects to do next. We've completed the projects that were in our original consent decree that were clearly outlined that needed to be green infrastructure projects that had a site tied to them. So those projects, we had a lot of them early on in our consent decree that we worked on. And this is one of those, the CID project that we just talked about. And so next stage of that is to say, okay, what do we learn from these projects? Which ones have proven to be, maintainable and, seem to go over well with the community? Which technologies do we want to see more of? Which technologies maybe have not gone over as well? And so we're in kind of that evaluation phase right now where we decide what makes sense for the next, 10, 15 years of this program. 20 years, sorry, I say the wrong amount of years.
Okay, next question from Jocelyn says, does KC Water offer any incentives to local businesses to implement their own systems to reduce water runoff?
We don't currently have an incentive program. There have been a few pilots looking at some partnership projects, but right now we don't have like an official program. Yeah.
How do you, what do you suggest for a company that's interested in looking at, like, how would they kind of start that process, or what kind of things would they need to consider? I know that we've referred some Green Business Network members that have reached out to us about it. We've had them referred them to you guys to maybe come and look at the KC Water, the campus that you guys have your office, because you have a great demonstration project there, and kind of see some of the things there. What would be like your initial kind of tips for how to get started?
Well, that's a really great question. I think, you know, I have an open door, and most of on our team, we're always willing to talk through, if you're kind of just bouncing off ideas, we could talk through some technical ideas of, well, this might be a good site for bioretention, or this might be a good site for permeable pavement. Just kind of as an initial sort of conversation. But, typically the first step would be, come and see Swope campus. We haven't been doing tours with COVID going on. But at some point we will have that available again. You can come and drive through the campus. It's open to the public during the week, so that is an option. And I would say there's a lot of design professionals out there who can help you get going with concepts. So, we work with a lot of really talented engineering and landscape architectural firms in Kansas City. HNTB is one of those here on our call today. And so, that's kind of would be your first step in getting something designed, typically, if you're going to do, a meaningful big improvement. If you're wanting to do some DIY, there's all kinds of great videos, YouTube videos about how to build rain gardens, how to do, kind of DIY type projects. So there's, some cool videos out there about depaving, which is something that I kind of think is exciting and fun. I want to depave a little bit of, places that I have influence over. Sometimes we can end up with so much pavement that we don't necessarily use or need. So yeah, those might be good first steps. That's a really good question. Sorry, I don't know if my answer was very.
No, it was good. Okay, I see one more question. So this is kind of a last call, attendees. We are nearing 2 o'clock, so get in your final questions if you have them. But the last question that I see here is from Tom, and says, how do you plan to evaluate performance over time?
A great question. So we do performance monitoring on our sites. So typically the first year that the project has been built, we do a baseline. This one, the neat thing with this project, and maybe Jeff could talk really quick about the piezometers that you guys had. That was a really cool thing about this project.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't get to do a lot of flow monitoring per se, but we did really try to pay attention to, because we're in the river bottom, we were looking a lot at the river levels and making sure that that wasn't going to impact infiltration capability of the project. And so we installed groundwater monitoring wells all throughout the sites, just to kind of be able to check the groundwater tables throughout the whole project, or throughout the whole design. And we found that it was relatively low, actually, for most of the area. And I mean, when I say low, I mean, 20 to 30 feet below the ground surface for most of the spots we were looking at. So it surprised me, but that's something we tracked and monitored throughout. And we also have the piezometers still there so that we can measure that after the fact. We also have kind of an outstanding potential amendment right now to do some post-construction monitoring on the project, just to kind of see what types of volume we're capturing and kind of understand how it's functioning and infiltrating water into the ground.
And so our Smart Sewer program team, our green infrastructure team, we monitor the completed sites. So typically we set a baseline on that first year. This one is great because we have some of that also pre-design information. We don't always have as much as we did on this site, so that was really neat. And then we set an interval that we check the project. So so this one, we haven't set that interval yet, whether it'll be every year or every 3 years, 5 years, to see our infiltration capacity and how that's changing over time. Also, flow monitoring, that's something that's being looked at. We're looking at a little bit perhaps more robust flow monitoring in a few places over time. But that's I start getting out of my lane if I talk too much about it, because I might not have the latest up-to-date information on the flow monitoring.
Great. Well, that is all of the questions that I see. So Lisa and Jeff, I just want to thank you again for your time that you spent with us this past hour telling us about this project. I just think it's really great, and you guys did a great job. And I want to thank everybody else for attending today's session. I'm sure that if you come up with a question, Lisa and Jeff would be happy to answer them. I can forward them on. As I mentioned at the start, I will be posting a recording of this on the Green Business Network website, and I'll email that link out whenever it is ready. And again, keep in mind BTG's business recycling program, or if there's any other way that the Green Business Network can help you with your sustainability goals, please let us know. And with that, I am going to go ahead and end today's session, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to get outside and enjoy what's turned out to be a pretty nice day. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.